On October 22nd, Deadline Hollywood broke the scoop that Deadpool director Tim Miller would not return to direct Deadpool 2, following quote-unquote creative differences with Deadpool star Ryan Reynolds. This of course came as a huge blow to Deadpool fans everywhere, as Miller's highly stylized direction was a big part of what made that movie such a hit with moviegoers worldwide. To provide some context, I will begin this editorial with a brief look back upon how both Reynolds and Miller came to be involved with Deadpool, and what they contributed to the first Deadpool movie. Then I'll look into what we have learned of the creative differences between the two, and analyze why Miller might have chosen to drop out, before considering what implications this might hold for the future of Deadpool on film. Before he directed Deadpool, which was the first feature film he ever directed, Miller was a visual effects artist. He made visuals for both video games, such as Mass Effect 2 and Star Wars The Old Republic, as well as for feature films. His standout contributions in feature films include being creative supervisor in Scott Pilgrim and designing the intro sequence of Thor: The Dark World. To me though, the most memorable thing he did prior to directing Deadpool was the opening sequence of Sony and David Fincher's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo remake. His intro sequence was the one memorable thing about the movie. The rest of it did, in my opinion, not live up to it. Miller got attached to Deadpool around 2010, and it was him who directed the proof of concept footage, which years later would leak online, but we'll get back to that. What is clear though from both his earlier work as a visual effects artist, the leaked Deadpool proof of concept, and the finished Deadpool movie is that Tim Miller is first and foremost a visualist. Ryan Reynolds first became aware of the character Deadpool during the production of Blade Trinity. That movie was made by New Line Cinema, who at the time had the rights to Deadpool, and who were thinking about doing something with the character. Since there were a lot of similarities between Ryan Reynolds' Blade Trinity character Hannibal King and Wade Wilson, it was actually a New Line executive that gave Reynolds a stack of Deadpool comics and suggested he read up on it. Reynolds did, and soon became the movie's biggest champion. In 2004, he became attached to star in New Line's Deadpool, to be written by David Goyer. But just like with New Line's then in development Iron Man, nothing further came of it. Unlike Iron Man, it was Fox that would acquire the Deadpool rights from New Line. The story of how that came to be shall be told in a future video. Until then, we all know what happened at Fox, namely Tom Rothman. That is a story we already told here at Midnight's Edge. To check it out, click on the thumbnail in the video, or link in the description if your device doesn't support annotations. Long story short though, Reynolds remained attached to Deadpool, who made his introduction in the Rothman micromanaged X-Men Origins Wolverine. Despite protests and warnings from Reynolds, Fox decided to take Deadpool in a very different direction from the comics, thinking fans would love it. Lo and behold, fans didn't. The uproar from test screenings was so loud and so bad that they actually shot that post-credit stinger where the decapitated Baraka reject opens his eyes in a later reshoot, in order to silence some of the fan hate. Not that that helped. Following the release of X-Men Origins Wolverine, things looked pretty bleak for Deadpool. Ryan Reynolds, however, championed on. He got producer Lauren Schuler Donner on board the idea of a Deadpool reboot which would ignore the much-hated events of X-Men Origins Wolverine, and in 2010, he personally hired Zombieland writers Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese to write the script. Before long, Tim Miller also came aboard. While Reynolds might have been off doing other movies, he was still developing Deadpool alongside director Tim Miller and writers Reese and Wernick. More than anyone else, it was the work of these four that made Deadpool into the movie it eventually turned out to be. With a different star, or a different director, or different writers, the end result might not have worked out the way it did, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. For all the progress in breaking the story and visualizing the movie, there was one stumbling block preventing the movie from actually getting made. the aforementioned Tom Rothman. He just didn't get it. In order to show him, Miller and Reynolds shot a proof of concept. This would be the test footage that would later be leaked online. In the footage, Deadpool even shouts out Rothman by name, but to no avail. Rothman held off on giving Deadpool the green light for the rest of his tenure at Fox. His tenure did eventually come to an end though. In 2014, after the proof of concept Rothman had rejected found its way online and broke the internet, Rothman's successor Jim Giannopoulos did greenlight the movie. That Tim Miller got some of his director buddies, like David Fincher, to vouch for the movie probably helped ease the decision along. But it was allocated a budget of less than $60 million, which as it turns out was a blessing. For Fox, this amount is a relative pittance, meaning that it isn't too important for them. While their attention was focused on the far more expensive and important X-Men Apocalypse, Miller and Reynolds had significantly greater freedom in making Deadpool than what is usually given to makers of comic book movies. Where the budget from Fox was insufficient, Ryan Reynolds himself made up the difference. For instance, Fox wouldn't pay for writers Reese and Wernick to be present on set whenever Reynolds and Miller were there, meaning 6 days a week for the duration of the shoot. But Reynolds wanted them there, and paid out of his own pocket to make it so. Likewise, director Tim Miller had his effects company do some extra work on the movie for free, meaning Fox got a lot of extra mileage out of the budget they did provide due to both Reynolds and Miller performing beyond the call of duty. But in this environment, creativity thrived. Miller delivered some spectacular visuals. Outside of Deadpool, Miller was not a fan of Singer's earlier take on Colossus, and did him right too. Make no mistake about it, Miller's visuals were instrumental in making Deadpool the hit it turned out to be. Reynolds was all about raunchy and more suggestive humor, had a field day improvising and filming stuff that would have given more traditional studio head honchos a fit. The end result of Miller's visuals and Reynolds' raunchiness? Deadpool instantly made Tim Miller a director to be reckoned with, and resurrected Reynolds' career. For Fox, Deadpool turned out to be the most successful movie in the entire X-Men franchise to date, and the most profitable one by a wide margin. Fox wasted no time greenlighting a sequel to the movie they had been so hesitant about the years before. But as it turned out, Deadpool 2 would now get its own issues to overcome. Not from the studio this time, but from the very same creative forces that made the first movie so great, clashing. From the wrap, we learned more details about the creative differences between Miller and Reynolds, which ended with Miller leaving the production. In the original Deadline Hollywood scoop, the split was described as amicable, which is pure spin. When someone leaves, not over a better offer, but over creative differences, meaning a difference in opinion about major aspects of the movie in question, it is never that peaceful. Indeed, the Wrap sources claims Miller and Reynolds have had a strained relationship at least since the release of the first movie. Deadpool 2 still doesn't have a release date, which in part apparently is due to Reynolds negotiating a better deal with Fox, which saw him receive a pretty massive increase in pay as well as increased creative control. This deal took a long time to negotiate, but for Miller, the greater point of contention is probably Reynolds' increased creative control. For all intents and purposes, that means a greater degree of influence over the movie is taken away from Miller and given to Reynolds. Earlier, we established that Miller is a visualist. Reynolds has a flair for raunchy humor. These two combined are what made the first Deadpool the hit it was. And for the sequel, both men seemingly wanted more of their specialty in the movie. Miller wanted to take the visuals to new levels, while Reynolds wanted to up the ante on the raunchy humor even more. While no source has stated this so far, it is certainly within the realm of possibility that both men, in addition to wanting more of their own specialty, might have wanted slightly less of the others. Another bone of contention, which might have been the breaking point, was the casting of Cable. Tim Miller wanted Kyle Chandler for the role. Kyle Chandler, of course, is a great actor, known for his roles in Bloodline, Friday Night Lights, and the excellent early edition. As far as resemblance goes, however, he isn't the first actor that comes to mind for the role of Cable. More conventional choices would be someone like Stephen Lang, Ron Perlman, or Dolph Lundgren, who Ryan Reynolds himself named in the post-credit stinger of the first Deadpool movie. But if Tim Miller insists that his vision for the movie requires a role as important as Cable's, to be filled by Kyle Chandler, and Reynolds wants someone like Lundgren, that's further room for conflict right there. With Reynolds' new contract and influence, he probably has the power to veto Miller, meaning Kyle Chandler is unlikely to be in the movie. But an implication of that is that Miller might feel Reynolds has so much influence over the movie that his vision as director is compromised. Is that reason enough for him to leave a surefire hit like Deadpool 2 is going to be? Let's see it from Miller's point of view. His first feature film, Deadpool, was a massive hit and propelled him into instant stardom. But Deadpool came out of nowhere. Outside of the built-in fans, there was no pressure to speak of from the industry, no expectation that it needed to become the blockbuster hit it turned out to be. If it had only done 1/3 of what it ended up doing, it still would have done everything expected of it. But Deadpool caught lightning in a bottle. The ugly duckling of the X-Men franchise did what no one ever dreamed possible and became the single biggest of the whole lot. Now, the pressure is on for Deadpool 2 to deliver, and this time, both fans and the industry expect the sequel to capture lightning in a bottle again. That is a far more stressful place for any director to be, but many directors will deal with that stress, provided they are free to do the movie the way they want and believe in. Usually, a director is granted more freedom after a hit. Miller was, however, granted less. He is in a position where he might feel very strongly any given decision is the right one, only to have it overruled by Reynolds. Not a great place to be for a director who is making his all-important second movie, the one that will show the world if he really is a great director, or if he's simply locked out with his first movie. Also, making the follow-up to a highly praised first movie is a tall order for any director, something both Jon Favreau, Joss Whedon, and J.J. Abrams, among many others, can attest to. Since Miller already has a massively successful Deadpool movie under his belt, moving on to another project which doesn't have the same level of expectation attached to it, and where he probably will have a greater degree of creative control, might look like the better option for his career. Indeed, Miller is expected to direct Influx next, another intended franchise starter for Fox. Succeeding in launching two separate film franchises would actually be better for his long-term career than doing two Deadpool movies back-to-back, especially if the second should not live up to the first. So where does that leave Deadpool 2? Should fans worry? There are some out there who already diminish Miller's contributions to the first movie. Don't. His visuals were vital in making that movie click. In the hands of another director, all else being equal, the movie would have been different, and it might not have caught on like it did. To those who do recognize Miller's importance to the first movie and worry how his shoes are going to be filled for the second, I have a quote from one of the finest stories ever to come out of Great Britain. Don't panic. In terms of look, tone, pace, and mise-en-scene, Deadpool 2 will be different now than it would have been with Miller still at the helm. But Miller has now set the rules and the standard for this version of Deadpool, meaning his fingerprint will remain with the franchise. For the sake of continuity, whoever ends up directing can't deviate too much from the template Miller set. Movies have, after all, changed directors before, and sometimes turned out better for it. Furthermore, nothing else has changed. The movie will move forward with the same script, by the same writers who wrote the original, with Ryan Reynolds, champion of Deadpool, firmly in charge. There are those who want Quentin Tarantino to direct. Well, that's not going to happen, as he is a creative force in control of his own movies. He might direct a sequence or two for other movies, but be a hired gun for another creative project? Not gonna happen. I would imagine the next director will be another visualist. Whether known or unknown, the next director will likely be someone who knows this is Reynolds' movie, and simply make the footage look cool instead of trying to influence the casting or the story overtly much. But is that a good thing, or was Miller maybe being willing to challenge Reynolds on key decisions, part of what made the first movie such a hit? Let me know what you think of that, who you would like to see direct Deadpool 2, and who you would like to see as Cable in the comments.
If you like this video, please hit that subscribe button. Join us for spin-free news and analysis of the happenings and corporate politics behind the scenes of your favorite genre movies, as well as explorations of your favorite characters and their backgrounds and context here at Midnight's Edge.